Good night, everyone, and welcome to Alternative Views. My name is Kimar Stewart, and I'll be your host this evening. So I want to say first how happy I am to have you yet again on another Thursday. We'll be discussing Barbados at large economic issues, and for this evening's podcast, we will be looking at a pre-budget talk. This evening, we do not have a guest. It will just be me and you. This is your night. And I'll be asking you, the audience, what do you expect to be in your budget come March the 18th? What do you expect to hear from the Prime Minister of the country? What are some of the issues plaguing you? What are some of the promises that were made that were not fulfilled in the budget? How are things with the International Monetary Fund going? We want to hear from you, the viewers. We have an international audience. We don't just cover Barbados. We go as far as the UK. We go as far as the US. We go as far as the US. We go as far as the United Kingdom, and we go uh, worldwide. As our audience is definitely a worldwide audience. So again, this evening it is all about hearing from you. I will give my initial comments, but I want to see comments from the viewers. What do you expect in the budget? Would you appreciate tax relief? Could you handle some more taxes? Um, how do you feel about institutions such as the National Insurance and Barbados Water Authority, CBC, Transport Board, all the different state-owned enterprises who, as far as we know, are intended to be privatized. How is or how those proposed changes? How do you see them fitting into the upcoming budget, and how do you see them uh, impacting Barbados, either positively or negatively? Um, so Yes, I look forward to hearing from you. So welcome, welcome, welcome again. Uh, Thank you all for tuning in. Just let me say a good night to my loyal supporters, members of our loyal team. Um, Welcome to you all. Thank you. Uh, we had Galvez who was on at 6:35, at least 25 minutes before the show started. So you want to express serious gratitude to Galvez. Thank you very much, Galvez, for tuning in, and good night to you. As I said, Galvez, I do not have a guest this evening. It will be just me and you and the audience, and I'm taking because I want to hear from the people this evening about Barbados's budget and what is coming down the pipelines for us who live, who work, who play in Barbados. So, good evening, Marcia. We have a Marcia, not our Marcia, but a Marcia. Thank you and welcome for tuning in, Miss Annette Wood. Thank you very much, Miss Wood, for tuning on to Alternate Views. Thank you to FX Trading BB. Welcome, ADG. Good night to you, Edward Tell. Welcome to Alternate Views. You were here very early as well. We appreciate that. Diana Seeley. Welcome, 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 Miss Seeley, to Alternate Views. Very happy to have you tuning in so far. We are at 18 likes. We have 68 persons so far. And I want to encourage you to like, and share all over Barbados. This is Alternate Views, our pre-budget talk, the lead up to the big budget, which will be happening on Monday. And then, as you know, the opposition leader responds the following day. So we're trying to have a platform where the authorities, and you do know the authorities, do watch the show so that they could hear how the people are thinking, what the people are thinking about, and what measures can come down the pipeline to give us an ease. So I'll continue to welcome some more of our viewers. So Marietta Ford, Welcome to you, Marietta Pitway. Very happy to have you. Thank you for tuning in. Sir Alfred Benjamin, welcome to the show. Very happy to have you with us yet another Thursday. Janine Motley, thank you. Wendy Ford Griffith, thank you very much. And then Doriel Clark, welcome to Alternate Views. So, good evening again to one and uh, all and sundry alternate views. We're here yet again, and this evening is about the viewers. What I want to do is I want to put a WhatsApp number on the screen. You can WhatsApp and request to be featured on the screen if you wish, and I will have you coming on here to share your perspective as to what you want to see in the budget. So I'm very much welcoming persons to sign on and be featured right here on the screen with me. Uh, that all and sundry can hear you. So don't hesitate, don't be nervous. We welcome we welcome you on the screen, even if you don't want to put your face on the screen. You're very much welcome to keep your camera off and have your microphone allowed, and we can hear you on alternate views. Um, yes, Pete, the alternate views will give um, a personal thoughts, and we have a show next week as well after the budget. So you will definitely be hearing from me as it relates to the budget. You will hear from me. Square Four, thank you very much, Square Four, for tuning in. Yet again, I'm always pleased to see you, Square Four. We want to highlight you as well for tuning in on a regular, along with everyone else who tunes in every Thursday. So welcome. Don't forget to like and share the live and to share alternate views. So let's jump in. Uh, I want to start by taking some quotes from alternate views, and I'm going to start. That's a reminder. Just to rehash some old issues that plagued us between 2008 and 2018. As you know, Alternative Views is not a political show, but more of an economic show. But you can't separate the two from politics versus economics. So we do have some undercurrents as it relates to politics. But however, the economics is the uh, sorry about that temporary break. Yes, so as I was saying, 2008 to 2018, the government of Barbados found itself having to cope with an international recession. You all remember the financial crisis, the global financial crisis, which impacted all over the world. And around 2010, we would have had a minister of finance who was Mr. Christopher Sickler at the time. He was the uh, minister of finance of the Democratic Labour Party administration. And as you know, the prime minister at the time would have been Mr. Frondell Stewart. And during that recessionary period, there were some economic indicators that the international world will usually look at as it relates right, as it relates to managing the economy, managing the society, your international outlook, which included credit ratings. But we'll get to that a tad bit later. And under Mr. Sinclair at the time, a number of painful measures were introduced to tackle the declining revenues, which is basically tax collection and ability to earn income. They were declining due to the financial crisis, and government had severe burdens on the. Uh, one moment, please. Having a temporary issue here with communication. Just give me 1 second. Right. My apologies. Yes, I can much better now. Yeah, so sorry, my apologies for that. So in continue as I was saying, you had some measures which were introduced around that time. You had VAT was increased from 15% to 17.5%. We had the elimination of tax-free provisions on allowances for travel and entertainment. Bus fares were increased. Yes, yes, bus fares were increased from $1.50 to $2. The excise tax on gasoline was also increased by 50%, and other measures which were more beneficial to the society at the time, including free bus fares for children, free summer camps, increases in welfare grants, increases in pension payouts, and free textbook loan schemes for children. Um, During that period, the tertiary level education, i.e., the University of West Indies, had a very serious debt burden towards the government at the time, and the government basically implemented a policy where students were uh, asked to pay funds and contribute towards their university education. Unfortunately, that policy was not very well sold to the public, and therefore the political economy suffered as a result from the huge dropout rate at the time, uh, which saw many students who could not afford to pay the fees at university dropping out at the time. Some even having to take student loans. I personally had to take a student loan to get through university, and that was not a very easy thing to do as a young person. Um, yeah. So, in moving on, a lot of the issues that we had during that time, uh, budget after budget after budget, it came across to the public as though there was no end in sight. There was increased taxation, however, opportunities for earnings, jobs. There was the impression that not many things were happening for the public. So, therefore, after a while, the public became fatigued with budgets in terms of wanting to have budgets. But I would say here that during that period, and I went back for a reason. I went back because we have to understand what happened before to get a clearer picture as to what we're experiencing now and what will happen throughout the future. And when I say future, I mean in very near future. Right? We had what we call unsustainable fiscal deficits. Right? So you have the primary surplus targets and fiscal deficits, two major items on which the IMF, right, on which the IMF continuously speaks about in the Bird Plan. So the primary surplus would basically be government revenues minus government expenditures, uh, and the fiscal deficit would be government revenues minus expenses less interest payments, right? So government has been running primary surpluses. The last administration, the last Minister of Finance, Mr. Sinclair, many people may not be aware, but the primary surplus of Barbados, meaning that the government made more revenue over expenses under Mr. Sinclair's time. And the primary surplus was about 3% of GDP, which was around, I think, like $300 million maybe, because the size of the economy was about $10 billion. So we were making approximately $300 million more in revenue over expenses during that time. But that story was not told. Um, so, in having difficulties paying some of your debts, experiencing several credit downgrades by rating agencies, um, some measures had to be imposed around December 2013. Um, the major announcement that at least 3,000 workers were intended to be laid off. And These issues, these economic issues, the leader of the then opposition, who is now the prime minister, capitalized on a struggling economy, right? It capitalized on the struggling economy, and with the assistance of the trade unions, the labor element as well, the former Prime Minister, Mr. Stewart, faced a barrage of attacks from leader opposition who used traditional media and social media. And as you know, I've been quite vocal about social media use and the impending cybercrime bill. Um, so those methods were used along with like votes of no confidence, petitions, parliamentary walkouts, people's assemblies, and marches around Bridgetown, much like what we see happening with the March Civics program in terms of marches in the city. So these factors, along with the trade unions merging with the merchant or the business class, uh, we had issues of governmental frustration, which the political economy of the country suffered seriously between that time because many of the major players were going in different directions. You had the government going one way, the labor unions going one way, the political oppositions going another way, the investors going another way. So the people suffered as a result of the different players not being able to see eye to eye. And I won't go into what were the requests by uh, the unions, but I wanted to make a quick quote surrounding some of the offers that were made from the government at the time to the unions, which they outrightly refused. So, as you could remember, the unions allegedly wanted a 23% wage increase. Um, that wage increase was asked by the NUPW and the Barbados Workers Union. As you know, the NUPW was headed by Kenny McDowell at the time, and the Barbados Workers Union was and still is headed by uh, the representative for St. George North for the current government, which is Miss Tony Moore. And they held steadfast to right, they held steadfast to that request. They even asked for additional things like coping subsidies and other additional benefits, in which they held up steadfast for. And when the government changed, the union's requests changed, and they accepted a 4% wage increase as opposed to the 23% uh, which was requested of the former government versus what was accepted with the new government. So you see the role that trade unions can play in the political economy in terms of either assisting or frustrating budgets of a country. As of now, in Barbados, the current circumstances are set that the Barbados Workers Union and the National Union of Public Workers um, have been co-opted by the government. So they basically co-sign or agree with majority of the political agenda of the governing administration, which works for a streamline of policy. However, the intent of that policy um, could be questionable. So we're not personalizing it. We're just speaking it about it from a structural perspective. Uh, we always encourage trade unions to work with governments. However, the intentions of the government must be above board. So, in around 2016, when Mr. Sinclair produced his budget, he made a quote and he said, "Managing in these times has been difficult, but contrary to popular belief, solutions are few and far between. Fiscal space is limited. Economic diversification is practically non existent. Preferential market access is a thing of the past. Structural debt is high. Development assistance is low. And social protection and the development, the springboard of our post independent success, is becoming increasingly more burdensome to carry in the face of declining revenues. And these sentiments characterize a period of trial and tribulation for the Mr. Stewart administration, as they did everything to avoid going to the International Monetary Fund. I'm going to read that quote again. In 2016's budget, Mr. Sinclair said, managing in these times has been difficult, but contrary to popular belief, solutions are few and far between. Fiscal space is limited. Economic diversification is practically non existent. Preferential market access is a thing of the past. Structural debt is high, and development assistance is low. And social protection and the development springboard of our post independent success is becoming increasingly burdensome to carry in the face of declining revenues. Right? And again, we were not with the IMF at the time. So that is 2016, taken from the budget of Barbados, which detailed the issue or the root cause. Right. I try my best, Diana, to bring it down. Just quoting what was said here, I will yeah, I will interpret. I don't feel lost. Right. Um so to break down what was being said in 2016, right? As you would know, basically the fiscal space is the elbow room that the government would have to do new investments, to do new projects, to give tax relief, right? That is basically what the government means by fiscal space. So there was not much elbow room happening in 2016, right? We often speak about economic diversification in terms of moving away from tourism and creating new industries. Our Minister of Finance since 2016 was saying to us that economic diversification of Barbados is non-existent, right? So, what other industries could we have created at the time that would have earned us the fiscal space, the revenue, the money to be able to move us over from tourism and create new industries to earn money? Our Minister of Finance in 2016 was saying, no, we don't have it, right? He spoke about preferential market access. Uh, Preferential market access is, and for my more senior learned persons on the life, preferential market access is what we had with Europe in terms of the export of sugar. So we in Barbados planted sugarcane on our many plantations, and we sold that sugarcane overseas to the UK and further Europe. However, Barbados signed on to the European Partnership Agreement, along with the fact that the Europeans clamped down on these preferential rates in terms of having secured markets, secured markets for Barbados to sell sugar. So, as opposed to Barbados going out in the world and competing with other countries trying to get prices, the UK and Europe had offered to buy Barbados' sugar at a heavily subsidized rate. Right? So we had a secure market to sell the sugar. However, that is no longer so. So those benefits were dwindling away from us since 2016. But in our last budget, we had promises to sell the sugar industry, a dwindling sugar industry that no longer has preferential markets. So I hope you're seeing on alternative views why I had to come backwards for you to understand what is happening currently, right? You lost the preferential market access to export sugar, right? You no longer have it. So that's why you can see the government right now attempting to get rid of the investments they have in sugar in terms of the BA, MC, and other agricultural things, because you don't have the the markets for that. So that is why they also want to change from sugar over into renewable uh, energy, basically. Yes, but I don't want to lose you on here. I will slow down for you, Diana, and I do, as you come here every week, I do explain what it means, so don't feel lost. But good night to you all again. We're looking very good. So far, we have 178 persons. So I just wanted to say good night to you a bit. Simone Daniel, Emerson Bob from the UK, Square 4, uh, welcome again, Pete Ray, Tracy Barrow, Sean Cool, Judrop Waldron, uh, Judith Ann Clark, Joyanne, Joyanne Fifth, saying correct? Yes, Joyanne Fifth. Welcome to you all. Janine Motley, Blue Baby, thank you for tuning in. You said that this is your first time. Welcome to Alternate Views. Welcome. As I said tonight, we're not having a guest per se, but what we're attempting to do is to have a budget talk. Just me and you. I've put a WhatsApp number on the screen, in the chats. If you want to be featured on the program, you can do so. We're discussing or we gather ideas from the people as it relates to what they want in the budget. What do you expect to come in the budget? Do you want, or could you handle some tax increases? Could you handle some tax relief? What taxes would you like to see gone um, in Barbados? Do you have any industrial ideas that we could do to build a new economy? So this is your platform. However, I'm attempting to set the basis for the conversation in terms of referencing alternate views and some additional information that we have here, uh, going backwards a bit in terms of some budgets and to lay the platform for persons to gather what will come in the budget on the 18th of March. Probably this is budget day, is the 18th, and we want to be ahead of the curve. As you know, the government ministers, they do listen. Um, we will even go so far as to say persons from the IMF listen, persons from the Caribbean Progress Studies Institute, many economists across the world um, listen to alternate views, and we would want to put a very solid case for uh, Barbados. So, in continuing on, um, thank you again for tuning in. We are up at 190 persons. Don't forget to like and share. So, as I was saying here, around 2018, uh, Barbados made a significant change in its economic landscape. So, uh, if you guys are that in tune with it, um, you could tell me. We had governance under no IMF. The last administration did not go to an IMF or the IMF. However, in 2018, Barbados went to the IMF. And part of the IMF program, they said that it was intended to tackle specific issues in Barbados, right? Um, as I said before, you all know of the issues as it relates to why and how and where Barbados could have went right or went wrong. So they say that part of the reason for going to the IMF was to tackle the high debts to GDP that we had, and they claim that the debt to GDP ratio was around 175%. Right? That basically means that for every dollar you earn, 175 was going to be towards paying debts. So we were not earning any money. Everything was going towards debt. We were being choked with debt according to them. But I want to remind you that the debt profile of Barbados If you can remember, Barbados owed itself in terms of the central bank having majority of the debt. The government at the time was printing money, and the printing of that money was occurring at the central bank, and that money was being used to pay wages and salaries. Right. However, when the administration changed, money printing stopped, and those persons were retrenched in the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation, or the BERT plan, the IMF plan. So you see the comparison that I'm already trying to paint here. Policy showed when Barbados was not under IMF program, we were able to print money and preserve jobs. If it was a sustainable policy, we leave that up to question. Um, However, when you look at it as a regular bread and butter issue, right? When we look at it as a bread and butter issue, uh, the average man would say at least I still had a job, right? He would say at least I still was working. I was still able to put chicken on the table. I still was able to buy rice. I was still able to to pay bus fare and send school the children, although he was being paid from printing money. Right? When the government changed now and the IMF got involved, persons were retrenched, then the conversation changed. So on one hand, you balance the books and you meet the targets according to the IMF program. But then on the other hand, you have the people on the ground saying, well, I lost my job. And for the persons who were retained, the cost of living and inflation in Barbados got so high, or is getting so high, that you classify it to be the working poor. So you only work to pay bills, and there's no additional funding or excess funding to do personal savings or to do any type of investing. So essentially, you're back to the times where you're working just to pay bills, and that's the situation now. The majority of the country, where persons do not have excess income to be able to do investing or savings, and therefore they feel like their economic fortunes are not growing. And I bring you back to the reference of the IMF program. Right? So I have a question here. It says when they got involved, and you think it would have been better, did it get did it get worse? No, this is the thing, right? Being involved with the IMF is a very precarious issue. I think the former Prime Minister Onafa recommended Barbados to go to the IMF, but he recommended Barbados going to the IMF on the basis that you had to have your own plan and to be able to say to the IMF, this is what you want to do, and you require the resources to be able to do it. Right? However, when you go to the IMF, there are conditionalities that are put in place to given to the country. So you get money, but you also get instructions. You're told what to do. So you no longer have autonomy as it relates to your policy space. Not saying that the IMF fully controls everything, but they do have a lot of control as it relates to your parliamentary procedures. Right? The presence of the IMF is basically the lens that we have to look at this budget through. We're not, or we cannot look at it from the perspective that where the government is going to give a budget and they have a leeway to come and write off all taxes, reduce all taxes, because simply we are in the IMF program and we have to continuously meet targets. Need I remind the viewers on the live that Barbados is in its second IMF program. First one in 2018, BERT 1, And now we have BERT 2, which was signed on December 7th, 2000, and I think that was 2022. And that's my birthday on December 7th, so I remember it quite well. I also remember that I wrote in the newspapers that Barbados was intended to go to the IMF again. That fact was denied by the Prime Minister of Barbados, but nevertheless, I think that most persons have learned by now that I usually am able to forcefully back up my statements, and therefore I was vindicated when Barbados was forced to sign another IMF program. Right? Before we signed that program, the credit rating agencies say that as long as Barbados signs an additional IMF program, that we will not be downgraded. Our credit rating will not be downgraded. Bear in mind that our credit rating is not at investment grade, by the way, but there are different levels of our rating is at junk, and there are different levels of junk. There's low junk, mid junk, really junk. If you get what where I'm coming from. So we are still at junk status, but the rating agencies were telling Barbados that as long as it signs on to another IMF program, they will not be downgraded. And recently, you saw clips with the Prime Minister calling out the credit rating agencies about the biases in the way they grade countries. Now, I find that very ironic because part of the criticism from the Prime Minister on the previous government's thing was about credit downgrades. How Barbados was downgraded 26 times in terms of credit rating. Bear in mind, right? Bear in mind, a country that was borrowing from itself, borrowing from the national insurance, borrowing from the central bank, increasing taxation, i.e., an NSRL and whatever domestic taxes, we were borrowing from itself. We hardly had any international debt, by the way, because White Oaks only restructured approximately $943 million in foreign debt. By the way, Barbados entered into the debt restructuring, and our debt profile has no change. We no longer borrow locally. We no longer borrow from the central bank. We no longer borrow from the national insurance. Um, we increase taxes, so we do draw more money locally in taxation because this is the our current tax structure has yielded the highest levels of taxes ever in history of any government administration in Barbados. But no, our foreign debt profile has jumped from 22% of GDP upwards to 47% in a very short space of time. And our debt profile has jumped from approximately 1 billion and some uh, dollars to approximately close to $4 billion since 2018. So what you saw was a tripling of Barbados' foreign debt level, basically, um, since 2018, and that is alarming. You've had um, so you've had economists like Carlos Ford recently on the show Alternative Views. He spoke about Barbados' debt trap. You see economists like Anthony Wood speaking about it. Economists such as Michael Howard speaking about it as well, about Barbados' debt trap. We had the estimates in Barbados, and you saw the announcement coming out from the Ministry of Finance that Barbados' fiscal deficit is over $1 billion. Right? So that basically is saying to you that if the government makes $3 billion in revenues, at least 1 point some billion dollars has to go out paying interest and paying foreign debts. Right? And this year the government is scheduled to borrow another billion from the IMF and other places. So as the years go on, our government makes less revenues, but debts are increasing, debt payments are increasing. You can clearly see that there will be a drastic reduction in central government and ministerial allocations, because if you have to parcel out at least a third of a third of your income or a third of your revenues to go and pay debts, and then you have another impending $1 billion in debts, where Barbados will be if we have to be paying out $2 billion in debt and interest payments, while we're only making 3 point some $1 billion in revenues. So you see the debt trap that Barbados is in, and this is very problematic. So the Minister of Finance, meaning the Prime Minister, has a very serious issue to tackle with this impending budget, because there's still outstanding issues like the reforms to state-owned enterprises, i.e., the privatization of more state-owned enterprises, um, the national insurance. Y'all can remember the reforms as well that was promised by the last year's BERT program, right? But I don't want us to be confused about what a budget will do, because I see the impending budget really as a political statement, or impending political statement, as opposed to a solid announcement on economic policy, because Barbados's economic policy is coming directly from the International Monetary Fund and the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, not necessarily the Cabinet of Barbados. Let me state that firmly. Right? The BERT program. I'm going to put it in the comments here for you to read. The BERT plan. Right? Y'all remember the BERT plan and the IMF. I wouldn't expect the viewers to I wouldn't expect the viewers to be able to read the BERT plan and interpret the economic language, because it's highly technical, right? But I understand it, and it's my duty to share my understanding with you. So what these budgets in Barbados have been doing since 2018 is tinkering with the economic system of Barbados. There has been no substantial changes to Barbados' economic system in terms of budget, in terms of presentation of budgets, because the main programming that Barbados is working from is not cabinet and the budget. It is the IMF and the Barbados Economic and Recovery and Transformation Plan. So if you want to understand how Barbados is doing and what Barbados plans to do for its future, I would recommend Barbados and Barbadians and our viewers at large listen, but don't take it to heart the pronouncements of the Ministry of Finance as it relates to the budget. Our budget process has now been watered down to basically saying that we might change a little one tax here, a little two tax here, we might give a little reduction here, we might tighten up here a little bit. But as it relates to impactful economic policies, do not look for it to happen in the budget. So don't feel disappointed that come the 18th of March that the Ministry of Finance gives a 4-hour speech. But at the end of it, you only see about 10 lines maybe as it relates to policy changes or any meaningful adaptations in terms of the political economy of Barbados. You might get some rehashed promises. You might get some rehashed promises from the last two budgets, promises that were made but not fulfilled. And these promises that the government will come forward with, if they do not match the IMF's agenda, well, like I said, they're just promises, right? But I want to read something quickly here, and then I'm going to tune into the comments, and let us start to discuss some of the possibilities here that you want to see. Um, Bert, we had the Barbados Economic and Recovery Transformation Plan, right? And the government said that this Bert plan was to tackle the high public debt we were facing. Um, we had large fiscal deficits, and we had high transfers to state-owned enterprises and low foreign reserves. Right? And the Bert plan there said was intended to correct these specific indicators. When the government announced a mini budget, if you all remember that mini budget process, that mini budget was really and truly a large budget because it included a whole slew of taxes, right? And that IMF plan was intended to last 18 months. However, it lasted much longer than that because, as I said, we are now in IMF program part two. Right? And that's unheard of anywhere in the world. Countries do not sign back to back IMF programs in such quick succession and get through it successfully. Most countries which default on currencies and enter into IMF program, furthermore, two IMF programs always devalue the currency. I'll say that again. All countries who has defaulted on its foreign debts and entered into an IMF program, furthermore, two IMF programs in quick succession, always devalue their currency. The history is there, the facts are there. Go and check it out. I'm not saying that Barbados' currency will be devalued. Let me make that disclaimer. However, the pressure is there. The governor of the central bank, Dr. Kevin Greenwich, when he was the senior advisor from the IMF to the government of Barbados, declared that in conversations with the IMF, the devaluation of the Barbados dollar is always on the table. It is always an option. That's contrary to what officials from the Ministry of Finance say, but I believe Dr. Greenwich because I too understand how the IMF works. I studied courses from the IMF's curriculum. I studied public sector debt statistics, public financial management, all with the IMF's Institute. So I have a thorough understanding of how these policies do impact on small island developing states, and I do take in all of the IMF literature on its entire loan portfolio, um, and all measured impacts are usually the same with some minimal deviation. So I don't see how Barbados, uh, a country so small, could be an outstanding outlier when you have countries like Bali and African countries like Mauritius and Estonia, all of these types of places um, going through the IMF program, all of them showing back the same type of result, especially the area of the pension reform. All of the pension reforms throughout the world on the IMF programs were the same. And Barbados is really no different because the policies that were adopted in the reform for the national insurance, I could show you the reforms from the IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department, and all of the recommendations are the same. So our government did not come with anything new or innovative. They just took a document right from the IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department and proposed the changes for the the government about through the IMF. I could quote something for you right here, right now on the spot. Uh, in alternate views, I made a reference to whoa, right? I made a reference here to the impending changes. It said here that an IMF working paper, which was done on fair and fast balancing, social protection, and fiscal responsibility, and quoted the persons who prepared it on the African department. Everything that happened with the IMF for Africa, Barbados adopted lockstep and wholesale. You see recently our country pivoting towards Africa. You see Barbados uh, lobbying Africa quite a bit. Um, that is not by chance or by accident. Africa is actually one of the biggest, or has one of the biggest loan portfolios for the IMF. And our prime minister is indeed on the board. Um, she's actually on the board of the governors of the multilateral banking system, and therefore the responsibility that our minister of finance has, i.e., prime minister, she has to oversee and the responsibilities of the African and Caribbean region as it relates to financing and the multilateral lending portfolios, right? So don't see it as that Barbados is going up there and expanding itself and it's good for relations with Africa. Our relations with Africa has everything to do with our relationship with the International Monetary Fund as we speak. Right? This person is saying, which makes a lot of sense though, to explore African resources. Yes, as you know, Africa is exploited quite a bit in terms of natural resources. And what we're seeing happening in Barbados is a similar type of exploitation, but we do not have natural resources like the African region. So our most important resource in Barbados, which is water, right? Water. Our water is currently being extracted, similar to what's happening in Africa, to be sold, right? So we are now monetizing our water for profit, right? The IMF program in Barbados has said that the Barbados Water Authority is intended to be privatized, right? That is a direct recommendation from the IMF. Countries that went through IMF programs tend to privatize their water resource company, right? I've spoken with economists, lawyers, CEOs, um, heads of departments for mergers and acquisitions at some of the biggest accounting firms around, and they all agree that they would like to take over the Barbados Water Authority because water is an essential item, much like electricity. And there's significant profit to be made in the privatization of water. And that ideology stems from the way how, again, the African countries and but this particular issue of private water mainly occurs in the South American belt, right? Bolivia and other places. This occurs in the South American belt, where where you have private water companies running the water supply to people's houses. So as opposed to paying the government water, you pay a private company. I would say time and time again that Barbados is headed this direction. And if you read the newspapers, you will see tender after tender after tender and expressions of interest written in the newspaper as it relates to the private sector entering into water augmentation or the supply of water to households. The private sector, we all know that the government handles water supply in Barbados, but you're seeing invitations and expressions of interest suggesting that the private sector, and you heard the prime minister, who's the minister of finance, saying that she's asking the private sector to come and augment water supply in Barbados. These type of liberal type of economic policies need deeper and further discussion in the public, right? But again, your budget, I hope you're understanding the structure of what I'm saying here to you. On a normal day, if our policy space was controlled by the cabinet of Barbados, I'm hard pressed to believe that a cabinet of how many other how many other persons, 20 some or the other, would agree to privatizing the Barbados Water Authority because they all enjoy uh, subsidized water rates. So to then to privatize the Barbados Water Authority, I think would be a little draconian. But however, we look at it now from the IMF's perspective, and it becomes a numbers game, right? So I looked at the estimates of Barbados and the Barbados Water Authority, which is listed under the head of the Prime Minister, is getting a $30 million allocation from central government, in addition to the $80 million a month made in garbage and sewage tax, in addition to whatever revenues collected from the sale of water, right? So the IMF was saying from the get-go, and I read it from Alternate Views, that one of the issues that the BERT plan and the IMF program intended to tackle was the high level of transfers from central government to state-owned enterprises. So as you know, a transfer would basically be the government subvention, or what the government gives to a state-owned enterprise to be able to run its day-to-day affairs. The IMF is saying to the government of Barbados, you need to cut transfers through every state-owned enterprise from central government to these SOEs. You need to privatize the more commercial ones who can make back the profit. You need to add levies and fees to the ones who could charge. So the hospital, when you go to the hospital, you have to be paying all types of levies and fees. Healthcare is no longer free as it was. Um, all of this is a part of the IMS program to fully monetize and turn state-owned enterprises into profit-oriented enterprises, right? So referencing back the IMF again and transfers, when you have an entity now like the Barbados Water Authority, which is what we call a public good, i.e., the average man, the poorest man on the street could have access to water. Uh, what the IMF and the government now is suggesting to Barbadians is that may no longer be a public good. It will now be classified as a private good, a for-profit good, right? Transport board, the same thing. Bus fares were usually subsidized. The government would foot majority of the cost, and you would come and pay you $1.50 or $2, whatever. That veil is now being removed, and the price of bus fares will now be brought to a level where the transport board could run itself as a completely profitable entity. Now, nothing is wrong with running a entity for profit, but a state-owned enterprise in a country like Barbados, where most people will never be able to afford to pay $5 in bus fare, or where most people cannot afford to pay water bills that are so absurdly high. Because if you remember, water bills went from $30 to approximately $75, $80 with the imposition of the garbage and sewage tax in the budget, right? So I want to read quickly here these list of taxes. The Barbados Economic and Recovery Transformation Plan proposed to implement the following: addressing revenue generating measures, which means that these measures that I'm about to list are what the government put forward to be able to earn itself money. It says here that the repeal of the National Social Responsibility Levy was expected to cost the government approximately $145 million of revenue. And they claimed that when NSRL was put on, many prices rose by double digits, and it decreased domestic transactions and economic activity. And the Ministry of Finance anticipated that the removal of the NSRL would, within 2 months, lead to a reduction in prices for the average Barbadian. While the Social Partnership and the Fair Trading Commission agreed to monitor prices, players in the private sector then later declared that the high prices of their commodities were not as a result of the implementation of the NSRL, and therefore prices did not drop. Right? We had the fuel tax. You know that government abolished road tax and replaced it with a fuel tax, which was levied at about 40 cents per liter. Right? The government income tax. The government introduced a new income tax band of 40%, and persons above 25,000 remain tax free. And they made some other changes to the income tax bands. Corporation tax, the government raised it from 25% to 30%, and then they dropped it to 5%, I believe. VAT, the government put VAT on online transactions and online purchases. Amazon, all these different websites, Netflix, and everything. They put VAT on those transactions. A health service contribution, right? They're saying that 2.5% of that was intended to go towards the hospital and improvements to the hospital. That was intended to raise $50 million. The departure tax at the airport, that was put in place as well. Then there's something called a room rate levy that was put in place as well, right? And that was in the mini budget, and that accounted for approximately $300 million in additional taxes, right? $300 million in additional taxes that were put on the backs of Barbadians since you had a change of administration and since you had the implementation of the mini budget, right? The implementation of the garbage and sewage tax, you should include in there as well, right? So $300 million worth, and then you would hear the IMF come forward and say that the hey, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. It just knocked me right out. Hey, that's my apologies. I don't know what happened there. So he would say the downsides of technology. But we are back on board. My apologies. So let me welcome you all back again. We've gone past 300 persons. We're now back down to 254. My apologies again for the break. We're working with technology, so we understand. But welcome to you all once more. I was in the process of explaining the interconnectedness of the IMF, the Bird Plan, and the impending budget, and what we can expect in Barbados as it relates to the budget. So I gave some history as it relates to how the Bird Plan and the IMF and the former administration, which spoke to the leader to the program, and I'm trying to land the plane as it relates to what we can expect based off the restrictions that we are currently under. So again, thank you very much, and let us keep the show going. I lost my train of thought there, so trying to rekindle that, and I was speaking about the implementation of the additional $300 million in taxation with the implementation of the garbage and sewage tax, the road tax, many of the manifesto promises, right? Um, you would then hear the IMF come forward and say that, oh, well, the government met its targets. The government met its targets. And they will say, well, the government met its primary surplus target, right? That's fine, but how when we look at the layman on the ground meeting an IMF target, which is just a numerical target, and when you connect that to people's everyday lives, there's a serious disconnect. I'm not connected to garbage and sewage tax, right? I'm not connected to the garbage, but the sewage, sorry, and I have to pay a sewage tax, which is unfair, right? But from the IMF's perspective and the government's perspective, $80 million a month is serious tax revenue that they are using to run the water authority and whatever other purposes they're using it for, right? But for the taxpayer, sewage tax is unjustifiable, right? So you have the tax at the pump. The tax at the pump is doing well from a numerical perspective, but every time you have to go in the gas station, you have to pay 40 cents in a tax, right? So what we're seeing now is the government who's collected the highest levels of tax revenue, maintaining basically their tax outlook in terms of revenue, which meaning that I do not suspect there will be any additional taxes per se. There could be some, but I don't suspect that we will have any serious increases in taxation. Right? I do not. I don't see income tax being raised. I don't see, but there will be some changes as it relates to the corporation tax. What I could see coming in the budget is impending levies and user fees at state-owned enterprises. So I could see a whole slew of uh, levies at the hospital. I could see you not having to pay for or pay more for medications, pay more for specific services at the QEH. I could see us having a carbon tax put on our water bills, claiming that they have to manage water authority, right? I could see an education levy coming in to help tackle the issue of schools and the cleanliness of schools and hiring additional teachers, and I can see policies like that, but I do not foresee increases in the direct taxation of the population, because the IMF has said it, the government of Barbados has said it, is that our revenue levels are at its optimal levels, right? Which meaning that if you go past this level of taxation, you enter into a realm of tax saturation, where the tax no longer yields the intended result because you carry the rate too high. Right? So I don't foresee new taxation coming per se. But again, I see levies and fees. And now there's taxation as well, or we call it indirect taxation. You might see some job loss, agreed, as the privatization of more entities come along. So the BAMC, you see some job loss there. The airport PPP lease, um, with the Arabs and the Chileans, we will see some job loss happening at the airport. We will see some job loss happening at the Barbados Water Authority. We will see some job loss happening at CBC. Um, we will see some job loss happening at urban and rural development when they merge. You will see the some job loss happening at customs. Maybe customs is probably going to be restructured, more in depth. Um, you're going to probably see some job loss. I'm trying to find the additional SOEs here so I can tell you exactly thing. But the changes to the state-owned enterprises and the changes to the SOEs will indeed see some job loss. Um, we had the IMF as far back as 1991 saying to Mr. Sandiford that at least a third of the public sector should go. Right, the public sector is indeed one of mainly the larger employer in the country, and it has become what economists call um, enlarged. It had too much growth. Basically, the public service may have too many people in it. So we heard the former governor of the central bank, the little Warren, saying that you should look for early retirement to cut the public service and the numbers in there. um, you saw the IMF saying it to Mr. Sandiford as far back as the 90s. Sure, if you question Mr. From the former Prime Minister on it, he would say the same recommendation was there as well. But the democratic socialist model of economics that Barbados practice, um, that is not the traditional way of the country. Barbados traditionally run deficits, borrow the money, and keep people employed because the workers and jobs are probably the main veins in terms of economic activity. So the more people you have working, the better. Right? If you have approximately an addition, if 10,000 people are put out of work today, it won't take long for Barbados to crash. Right? It wouldn't take long for the welfare numbers to shoot up in the air. Uh, Over the last 5 years, welfare numbers jumped from 3,000 to 8,000. So 5,000 additional persons are on welfare today as opposed to previous years. Right? So those are impacts of the IMF program. Those are impacts of the previous budgets since 2018. Right? Entities like the National Housing Corporation, which are now transferred into the entity called Hope, is a privatization of housing. Right? Housing was once regarded a public good, but it has no. But we have private contractors building houses, but we're looking at low income housing. Right? That's government's remit, but the government has now transferred the building of low income housing over to the private side. Right? So the main point I'm making to you here now is that there's less control that the government and the state of Barbados has over its own budgetary process because we've now traded sovereignty and autonomy for IMF and multilateral financing in exchange for what they call technical assistance and allowing the IMF and these other institutions to come in and help direct public policy. So, as opposed to Barbados having a philosophical practice of economics, and I gave you many examples of those type of philosophies: water as a public good, housing as a public good. These things are now classified to be privately oriented activities to allow the private sector to come in and monetize and make significant sums of money. We see it happening right now with the Barbados Light and Power. Electricity was once classified as a public good put on by the state, but with the entrance of Emira into the space, Look at how we are constantly taken advantage of by Emira and having a private one source of an important utility such as electricity, right? So think about that model throughout the entire public service, where majority of the public services are profit oriented, and you have to pay a point of sale for everything. Where the education system now becomes profit oriented, um, where we do away with free public secondary school and free public primary school. Um, and this happens in Jamaica where people have to pay to go to school, right? These things may be considered foreign to the Barbadian mind, but they're not foreign in terms of the practice of economic models. It happens right there in Jamaica, right? So these type of new policies will visit Barbados, um, and I could see a few of them being rolled out smartly and covertly in the new and impending budget, in agreement with the Burt Plan 2, uh, which Barbados signed on to. My last point on that before I engage you directly now would be the tertiary level sewage plant. So we have new and innovative ways in which the IMF um, is seeking to monetize Barbados's water. And I say the IMF because the first utterance was made by Mr. Ryan Strong, who's the minister in the Ministry of Finance, while speaking to the IMF. I don't know if you all remember that video. He was speaking at an IMF forum where he said that Barbados will be entering in a debt for nature swap worth $600 million to be able to upgrade the South Coast sewage plant into a tertiary level sewage plant for a water reclaim project to allow us to put uh, the sewage water back into the clean water aquifers that we have. So they're going to build these plants, and these plants will clean the sewage water, take out wherever E. coli or stool or whatever, and put it back into the clean water aquifers to be able to replenish our water supply. Because in the name of climate change, they are suggesting that Barbados has a drought or a shortage on water, right? Um, so to be able to tackle that problem, right, to be able to tackle that problem, you go ahead and you try to reclaim that sewage water. Now, we all know that Barbados had a problem where the sewage plant malfunctioned, for however it malfunctioned, and we had sewage flowing all over the streets in Barbados, right? We got that problem rectified. Yes, we got that problem rectified quickly. Yes, we're having some internet troubles, seemingly. Right. Right, so we had the government saying to the IMF, or we had the IMF saying to us, basically, they're going to support our Barbados Water Authority in terms of having access to the financing and the technical capacities to be able to upgrade that sewage plant, right? So we engaged all type of international partners. Our deputy prime minister went to Netherlands and Europe to consult with the Dutch private sector and the Dutch government for advice on how to tackle Barbados' water issues in the name of climate change, right? In the name of climate change. So if you all guys following Barbados' policy space, you keep hearing the prime minister. There are so many ministers keep speaking about climate change, the very strong agenda, climate change and the very strong agenda, climate change, climate change, climate change. Climate change now basically is the new wave where the international world has trillions of dollars set aside for countries unsuspecting to come and borrow this money to be able to implement the climate agenda. So Barbados, seeking to borrow from the international multilateral world in the name of the climate agenda, is putting forward the Barbados Water Authority as basically a test subject to be able to run this tertiary level sewage plant where we take the sewage from going into the sea and putting the sewage into people's drinking water. Right? Again, IMF construct. So the European Investment Bank now, which is one of the multilateral partners, is putting forward the financing to be able to do it. Um, the Open Society Foundation is putting up financing to be able to do it. The Rockefeller Foundation is putting forward monies to be able to so these type of new and individual, well, they call it individual, but these type of new economic policies that are totally foreign to Barbadian culture, as you can see, is now creeping into our policy space. So I'm encouraging you, the audience, to listen quite keenly to the Prime Minister on budget day, the 18th of March, and you're going to hear her speaking about this $600 million to upgrade Barbados's sewage plant to a tertiary level sewage plant. And it gave you basically the rationale as to how it will come in the budget and the reasons why it will come in the budget. Right? Because these new nuances that are developing the country is as a result of Barbados signing on to two IMF programs and opening up itself to multilateral financing. Right? There's nothing wrong with borrowing some level of money, right? But borrowing from these institutions always come with conditionalities, right? And right now, sewage water in the clean water aquifers. But enough of that for now. I want to engage you now, my audience. So we're going well so far. We have about 332 persons on the live. So I'm very grateful for the audience. Some persons are definitely having some internet troubles, and that is understandable. We're sharing knowledge here, so these things do happen. Um, so I just wanted to engage you here. I saw some comments coming in earlier. So I want to take a comment directly from the audience, and let me speak to that. But I am enjoying myself sharing with you. So if you also are enjoying this conversation much like me, give me a thumbs up in the comments. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share, don't forget to tell a friend. I enjoy my Thursdays with you. As we said earlier, we don't have a guest because I personally wanted to engage you, the audience, to hear how you're thinking, what you're thinking, and where you would like this budget to go. And from reading these comments here, I've seen some very interesting contributions. So I just want to take a couple of them and we will speak to them on the show. Don't forget that my WhatsApp number is there. If you want to come on the program, just send me a WhatsApp. You'll receive the link and you could come straight on to the program. Let us share and have some conversations about this impending budget. Yes. We have Hurricane Rita asking what is the end game of the IMF in Barbados. um, Hurricane Rita, the IMF is a lending institution, and the IMF's aim is to increase its lending portfolio and to keep countries borrowing from them because that is how they make money. It's all about the mighty dollar. Unfortunately, traditional IMF policies have brought countries to their knees, and Barbados, I know we think we're special, but as it relates to the IMF. Basically, just look around. Jamaica had a currency peg to the British pound. I think it was about three to one. A very strong dollar. Guyana had a very strong dollar as well, right? Trinidad, they all had strong currencies. They were fledgling countries performing quite well. They all went to the IMF, and these countries have never been able to recover from the policies of the IMF. Right? To this day, Jamaica is still in the IMF's hands as we speak. So the idea is to get countries to borrow and to keep countries borrowing. Hence, the rationale for the conditionalities, because the conditionalities will basically ensure that the country finds it hard to emerge and to develop a proper payment schedule that they could be able to repay the IMF in full and on time. The IMF is not a buddy institution. They're not there to help. They're there to make money, and I wish the officials would be more forceful and factual as it relates to the IMF, the IMF's agenda, and to give the public the truth as it relates to this bird plan, bird one, bird two, and to say to the public of Barbados really that we really don't have the full autonomy as it relates to developing budgets and developing policies in Barbados, which could essentially give an ease to Barbadian households, consumers, and the like because of the IMF conditions. So I hope that answers your question, Hurricane Writer. This is Mr. King saying the design of the plant by the BLP administration, hence the yes. But that's more of a political question, Mr. King. Um, but yes, they did design the plant. We have somebody saying she can get rid of all of these big paying consultancy jobs. That is true. At one point, we had $24 million in consultants. Um, Hurricane Rita again saying that this sounds like an external monetary predator is loose on Barbados. Very interesting words. Um, Somebody saying more taxes on water. Man would bring anything to do with education when that is one of the pertinent issues that was not discussed. That's Denzel Grant. Uh, we have here carbon tax already hiding there as a fuel tax. Now you brought up that conversation about fuel tax, Pedro. I wanted to open the eyes of the people of this country as it relates to this fuel tax because an issue was raised with me that the fuel tax captures majority of the population, but it excludes business players, right? The big business players, right? The catch to the fuel tax was that you no longer have to pay road tax. And the old road tax system was charged where you would come and put your vehicle on the scale and then they would charge you road tax accordingly. However, a big sales pitch went out to the country in terms of a manifesto promise saying that they would have removed road tax and Barbados could pay a tax at the pump, right? No, every time me or you go to the gas station, we have to pay 40 cents per liter, right? 40 cents. So this is a tax of 40 cents on gas, right? So if a liter for $1, you're gonna pay your 40 cents in gas tax. If it for $10, you can pay $4 in gas tax, right? And if you go to the pump 1,000 times a day, you have to pay gas tax 1,000 times a day, right? On it, so that includes now, because before, the guys who operated boats, they didn't have to pay. Fishermen didn't have to pay fuel tax. They didn't have to pay road tax. Sorry, weed whacker, the weed whacker landscapers, they didn't have to pay road tax, right? Even on Cursina, they didn't have to pay that. So the changes in the fuel tax from road tax now captures a wider net of people who use gasoline and diesel, etc. However, the business player, through construed accounting, can say on his books that my expenses in terms of gas, because if you have a company and you have a fleet of cars, one of your line items on the expenses will be gas expense, right? So your gas expense was automatically increased by, they will say, 40% or close by thereof if you deduct the road tax. But we say 40% for conversational purposes. You can then put on your books that your expenses increased by 40%, and therefore you can write down your income by that same percentage that you would have been paying in gas tax. And then when it's time to pay corporation tax, you exempt from paying it because you wrote it off in terms of your income. So the business houses and these big companies that buy a lot of gas and go to the gas station on regular, they're actually exempt from paying fuel tax. But every time me and you regular drivers and fishermen and weed whackermen and we go and buy gas, every time you have to pay tax. There's no way for us to have a rebate or reclaim or filing anything. But for the business player, I ain't saying him, but we say we use Shafet, for example, who has a lot of cars, right? When they write on their books that their gas expense has gone up significantly by XYZ percentage because of the gas tax, they can then deduct that from their income and therefore write down the income by that amount, which therefore reduces the tax burden that they would have, right? So that is what this fuel tax is really all about. So it was nothing to benefit the average man on the street, right? The same way the garbage and sewage tax, which was supposed to be a temporary tax, they said 18 months, and it was supposed to go to the sanitation to buy trucks. Trucks were bought. It was supposed to clean up the sewage off the streets. The sewage is, I won't say clean because it's still running through the greenhouse swamp, out through the sea, but it's off the road, right? But the tax is still there, right? And the tax increased water bills from $30 to $75. It's such a big jump, right? And you have hotels and the much larger companies paying the same domestic rates as the person in the household. You all know hotels were paying $29 and $30 in water bills in Barbados. And you know that there are hotels in this country that owe the water authority significant sums of money and refuse to pay. But the water authority don't cut them off, like how they would cut off a domestic householder, right? Yes. We had to drop water in here, agree on my opinion that it was supposed to be 18. Someone was asking for the Auditor General's report. Yes, the Auditor General did a report. It's probably available online. Um, Hurricane Rita was saying Beijing's needs tax cuts. High taxes are suffocating Beijing's. As to Blue, good night to you. Um, Pedro Jam is saying you see the danger with one person controlling energy. Much to the credit of the government, they actually demonopolize the light and power, and that is the reason you are seeing so many expressions of interest for new companies to enter into the supply of electricity. Like that hence the renewable energy push. Last year's budget, y'all remember the government making significant reference to renewable energy. They even spoke about putting the PV plants on the whole project. They were even offering public servants loans to buy electric vehicles, and they were discussing transitioning over the public service onto more solar and other types of energy. And you're seeing a lot of companies popping up right now, trying to get into supplying electricity to households, and that way, um, on the surface, it looks like water authority has been demonopolized, but it really hasn't. What the government did was to not renew the old license as it was, but then issue three additional licenses and then give all three to Light and Power. Right? See what they did there? I'm gonna repeat that again. The government and the old monopoly arrangement with Light and Power, which gave them full control over the grid, electric grid, and electric infrastructure of the country in terms of supply and everything. They refused to renew that arrangement. The government then created three new arrangements with three new types of licenses to supply electricity, but then they gave the Light and Power all, right? So, uh, yeah. So, Light and Power essentially ends up in control because the grid is really owned by Light and Power or controlled by Light and Power. So even if you have an electricity supply company, a smaller one, you still have to feed it back into Light and Power's grid. So you still end back at right in Light and Power's hands. Right? So what they did was to move from a monopoly to a monopsony. So economic jargon. Monopoly to monopsony. So there was no real fundamental change as it relates to the on the belly or the underpinning structures of how Light and Power has control over the country's economy as it relates to the supply of electricity. So hoping that explains some of what Pedro was trying to say. Um, we can write it again. Saint Tyrone Green here. Yes. Denzel is saying, I am keeping hope alive, and that is not the hopeless project in St. John. Wow. Good night to the people in St. John, by the way. Uh, very happy that my people from St. John are on. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have Mervinette. Where are you from, Mervinette? I've never heard this name before. Also seen in other parts of the Caribbean. Fees at public health care. Furthermore, to receive free health care, the visit had to be done after a specified time at night. Whoa, that is interesting. Could tell us a bit about that, Marinette. Don't forget that you can send me a WhatsApp at 846-9912 to receive the link. If you want to share on the screen, you're very much welcome to do so. Just send me a WhatsApp and I'll be happy to share the link. If you don't want to put your face on the screen, that's quite fine. You can keep your camera off and you can speak through the microphone. Let's have some further discussion. We're going really well so far. We're up at 371 persons, and I am taking comments and questions directly from you, the people, and offering you any insights you wish. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but I am not charging $40,000 a month in consulting fees. Like how some economic players residing in Barbados would do. This is all for the love of the people, and that is why alternative views uh, becoming a major thought driver and platform in Barbados for economic ideals. And we are attempting to revolutionize the way in which Barbadians see economics, hear economics, and we also want to encourage the policymakers, the politicians, the heads of state-owned enterprises, even private banking sector, credit union sector, insurance, the entire financial sector to watch alternate views and to be able to take uh, some lead as it relates to the new economic environment that we operate in globally. So thank you all in advance. You don't have to write me any invoices. Yes, but taking some further comments here, we have people saying water bills are not over $100 because they're not reading the meter and using interim bills to capture from unsuspecting citizens. More revenue for unsuspecting citizens. Advanced robbery. Government has a fiduciary responsibility for its citizens. That is true. Somebody saying that's the lie they perpetrate. Water is renewable based on the water cycle. It's how it's captured, how well it's kept from free or yes. YouTube users saying that all of a sudden Barbados does not feel like a real place. Who represents us on these issues? Torrent can't roll back any of these decisions. um, Sean Cool is saying they will sell foreigners the good water, but give us the sewage water to drink. That is completely accurate. And let me just say that I oppose that. So whenever the prime minister comes with in her budget speech, yes, we're having some serious internet troubles tonight. Um, so bear with me and bear with you as well. But we're really having some trouble tonight. But we made to. Yeah. So I was saying, when if the prime minister comes speaking about the sewage water and the to build the tertiary level treatment plant in the budget, because it will come in the budget. And if it doesn't come in the budget, it's because we spoke about it here first, so they took it out. That's the only reason it will not come or be spoken about, because $600 million is a lot of capital investment. And $600 million worth of capital investment in Barbados right now can drive some level of economic activity, can provide jobs, right? It can give respective players some elbow room and fiscal space to be able to do future things, right? So if you look at it solely from a monetary perspective, $600 million is quite a bit of money. However, I don't think we need to be investing in putting sewage water into the clean water aquifers. Um, yeah, I don't think we need to do that. But pay attention to that one in the budget. Marinette is saying that that also happens elsewhere in the Caribbean, private water companies. Simone is saying that it's very dangerous. You'll find soft drinks become cheaper than a bottle of water. We need to reject this. Agreed. Uh, Barbados's prime minister um, has said that there's significant room in the country to have a bottled water industry develop. Right? I just want to look for that and show you it. Uh, on the screen where our prime minister was speaking about Barbados um, entering into the bottled water market, and Barbados Water Authority should be bottling water and selling it. And that was a statement made by our leader. Uh, yeah, that statement was made. So you all guys are on track and on course with my train of thought. We have Square 4 saying the PM tell the country it has no plans to devalue the Barbados currency 2019-2020, and the administration dance around devaluation. They think asking whether to pin the dollar to the EC currency. No, I let me say this. Um, a devaluation comes in two forms. Um, Regardless of what the prime minister may say, and I try to separate politics and economics, but it's quite difficult. But regardless of what the prime minister may say, Barbados is experiencing an internal devaluation. I Dr. Kevin Green spoke to it on CBC already publicly, and he said that a country always has options of external devaluation, where you remove the currency peg, or internal devaluation, where you basically do what the MF is recommending in terms of cutting transfers to state-owned enterprises, privatizing these SOEs, reducing debt, reducing welfare, cutting non-contributory pension, reforming national insurance, privatizing public insurance in terms of national insurance, um, increases of prices, right? Cutting back in all ministries, sizing down the budget allocations for ministries. This is what you classify as an internal devaluation, right? Basically, cutting the spending power of the average man. So you would increase taxation to the point that it is that right now where you basically work to pay bills and pay debts, but there's no excess money for again savings, or there's no access money for investment. And that is the point we are at right now. I see someone wanting to get into the program, so I'm going to send the link to that person to see if we get them on. But again, I want some feedback from you. Um, Very much appreciate it. Yes. Want some feedback from you would be quite appreciated. Sean Cole was saying earlier that inflation in Africa is a lot worse than Barbados. Um, William Anderson getting saying thanks for the heads up. This is when we were speaking about Africa. We have Marietta Forrest saying the purchasing power will be even less than it is. No, and that solidified the point I made, Marietta, about cutting of your purchasing power. We live in Barbados, but we feel that we cannot enjoy the material items, the luxury items. We feel that tourists come to Barbados and are able to enjoy a lot of what Barbados has to offer. But as a Barbadian, you basically work to pay bills, and then we are back uh, to square one, basically. Um, Once upon a time, Barbados, we had persons who were able to go to work, have savings in the credit union system, be able to buy private insurance plans, still be able to have a cupboard filled with groceries, have gas, be able to send school children, and to live a full life on a basic salary. I saw most of my family members living on salaries of $400, $500, $600 weekly, and they were able to live proper lives during those times. They built houses out of pocket. They didn't necessarily take loans to go and build those houses. um, it took longer, but at the end of the day, they owned the houses. not like what we have in now, where we have $5 billion in personal debts, and the banks owning majority of the houses in Barbados. Um, as a real estate agent in Barbados, I able to see how people are affording homes. And ironically, most of the homes that are selling nowadays are luxury homes, up on about 600,000, close to $1 million. But it is not the average Barbadian buying these homes. People are coming in to Barbados and buying up the luxury items, right? A lot of Barbadians are selling their homes right now because they can't afford one, the land tax, which is a big problem. They can't afford the land tax and still to be able to maintain the house and maintain their lives. This land tax issue is a very big issue, as it was announced in the 2023 budget that the government of Barbados is not in a position to offer land tax relief for that current fiscal period. However, the government is confident that relief can be offered as soon as April 1st, 2023, and is proposed to sorry, and is proposed to increase the threshold for land tax on residential properties, which will bear no land tax from $150,000 to $300,000. And subsequently, from April 1st, 2026, those homes valued up to $400,000 will pay no land tax. Right? So look for that in the budget as well. Right? You will hear that coming in the budget as well. That starting April 1st, 2026, homes valued below $400,000 will no longer pay land tax. That is what will be thrown out there in the budget to be able to quell the situation that the member of parliament in Barbados raised surrounding the land tax issue. That will be thrown out there. So if you have a home that is close to half million, you will pay land tax, right? The average man in Barbados cannot afford a home more than $500,000. One, the bank will lend him. Two, he just don't have the money. And three, a personal friend not gonna lend him the money, not that level of money. So persons who are fairly well to do and well off, who are able to afford, like, who are able to afford those type of investments, to be buying houses at that value. So I I I don't support land tax period. But however, if you have a more sizable property and more sizable properties, what the government is suggesting, and I agree with the government here on this one, that if your property is above $400,000, then you should be paying some level of land tax, right? I I I, I agree with them on this one, but my overall my overall position is that land tax should go altogether. But again, the IMF, right? The IMF has recommended the government to put taxes on personal wealth. And you can reference this in the same work plan issued by the IMF program, right? They said to put the taxes on personal wealth. So if you put the taxes, you put land tax on people's wealth, there's a high chance that people may not be able to afford these higher rates, and therefore they may lose the homes and lose other uh, investments they have because of the taxation rates on personal wealth. So what you're seeing now is that those persons who are able to work hard and become wealthy over time, the policies that are suggested by the IMF will kind of slow you down a bit in terms of putting additional tax burdens on you. Again, prime example, this land tax issue, right? So it is it. I just want you guys to um, be cognizant of these issues. Yeah. Yes. So the just hoping that we have something there. But on budget day, when you hear it, you can say that you heard it on alternative views that the government will re-announce that plan that they announced last time, last budget, and said that, well, if I can remember, there was a tax called the municipal solid waste tax, right? Where persons were asked to pay this municipal solid waste tax. This was under the last minister of finance. Um, the municipal solid waste tax, you that tax was placed on persons who had a home valued over a certain threshold. So I think it was approximately $285,000. Now, if your home was valued above that, you had to pay the municipal solid waste tax. Right? So persons in the lower income brackets and stuff who don't own a home or own a board house or own a home of lesser value, they have to pay that municipal solid waste tax. However, that tax was removed and the garbage and storage tax was put in place, and then we all had to pay a garbage and sewage tax. So I just hoping you understand again the disparities. I started by painting the two. Always we always go back and then we come forward. Like so you see the great disparity as it relates to the municipal solid waste tax, the sewage tax. I know you're seeing through land taxes how they are raising the threshold to say the people whose property are below a certain amount what I have to pay. So for some person like Dr. Sonia Brown, we now have to ask what's the value of her property. But we also need to protect against corruption where the Barbados Revenue Authority might not be going about there on agenda trying to inflate people's property values in order to push them into the tax bracket where they will not have to pay uh, those taxes. So, an additional policy should be put in place to regulate the powers of the Barbados Revenue Authority and their ability to increase land tax values willy-nilly because of this new impending policy, which will say that households that are below that amount will no longer be paying land tax. Um, yes, we have Judith Ann saying she agrees land tax should go altogether. Natasha Hope is saying so basically the bank owns the house and the government own land. Or if you don't can't pay. Yeah, I try my best to think. Yeah. Square Four is saying Kimar, this country respectfully doesn't have any person to speak on national authority priority. I volunteer myself. You have Caswell Franklin, you have Maxine McLean, you have the opposition leader, you have Michael Howard, you have Carlos Ford, you have Maureen Holder and the Barbados Consumer Network. So you have quite a few persons who are out there. Maybe the mainstream media doesn't carry them enough. I would say newspapers, but the communication has changed. I say that if you want information, you go directly to the source. um, you see me here because I come to YouTube. I also put out videos as well. So you will see me. Most of these persons do put out public information. So it, responsibilities on us a lot more to get out there and get access to information as there are so many different outlets and people putting out information constantly. Um, We have Marinette saying, before Chaka overrunning Harrison's cave, there was already a bottling and exportation of water gathered from the cave. They exported to select high-end markets. Heard this on a cave tour. That is very interesting. um, I didn't know they were getting water from the cave, but that is interesting. Um, we have to get more information on that. Alice Murray saying, "What about having the U.S. dollar as our local currency, as per Dr. Worrell?" Now, uh, Alice, I don't know if you watched the previous alternate views with uh, Mr. Rashid Griffith. Mr. Rashid Griffith spoke at length to dollarization, where we would change out the local currencies for the US dollar. Um, as you know, Barbados does majority of its you do all of your international transactions in US currency. You pay that in US currency. So quite a few things happen in US currency. So I guess the rationale that Dr. Worrell is putting forward is that, hey, um, Barbados dollars are not usually spent outside of Barbados. They're spent within our 166 square mile sphere. So will not get internationally accepted currency to be able to trade it inside and out, have access to greater levels of investment. Um, Barbados's debt levels, we don't see a recovery anytime soon. So what he is saying, without saying it, is that in his estimation, the currency has basically lived out its usefulness. Right? These things do happen. Currencies do live out their usefulness. I know that having a Barbadian dollar is an issue of you maintain a level of domestic power to be able to print money, to be able to borrow money from the central bank and other institutions that may host Barbadian dollars. Um, yeah. So there was general food for thought. There was a lot of conversation. We're gonna have to have this discussion again on dollarization. Um, Hopefully, I would love to have Dr. Worrell on the show. So maybe we can arrange that to have Dr. Worrell come and explain, along with Rashid again, uh, to give the public some more information on this concept of dollarization and Barbados adopting the US dollar as its trading currency. Now you have persons on the other side who will say, no, no, don't do it. We have BRICS. Barbados should consider BRICS. BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Um, so I want a fair and balanced discussion. I want to hear from the proponents of BRICS. What benefit can Barbados gain from partnering up with the BRICS countries? I know Barbados signed on to the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a Chinese sponsored development plan. Barbados signed on to that plan through our Foreign Minister Jerome Walker in around 2019. So that's probably where you're seeing such significant levels of investment happening in Barbados from the Chinese region. Um, I have some very interesting opinions on Chinese investment. I always say that the Chinese do not force you to borrow. The Chinese do not force development. Everything is by choice. And if our governments do not have the discipline to interact with international lenders, with China within some type of measured approach, where the problem is not China, but the problem is your government, your leaders, who don't know how to handle themselves diplomatically as it relates to borrowing countries' money, right? If but China is a country that lends money, and if Barbados wants to borrow money, Because there are not many countries in the world who do lend or have uh, reserves to lend out. Like China, China has a lot of foreign currency to lend out, and they have been lending it out to anybody who willing to borrow. And Barbados is one of those countries. Barbados borrowed like 400 and some million to do road works in the Scotland district area, to do over all of the roads in St. Andrew. He borrowed significant sums to build the Sam Lards. Uh, we have Chinese have agricultural products in Barbados. Uh, Chinese investing and in Barbados food supply. Hmm? So the unfortunate thing is when borrowing from the Chinese, um, must say if you're gonna borrow from the bank, there's collateral required, and countries have national assets, and national assets do get put up as collateral when borrowing from the Chinese. So if you go and borrow $100 million from the Chinese Exim Bank, knowing full well, knowing full well that you do not have the fiscal discipline to be able to earn the foreign exchange to repay China, well, what do you think will happen? It could have been China, Argentina, Italy, England, France, any country in Africa. It doesn't matter. If you do not repay the monies borrowed according to the schedule, you stand to lose, right? So that's how I feel about it. So I support Barbados trading with China. All countries in the world trade with China, right? However, the extent to that trade, um, I may have some personal qualms about it as it relates to exposing Barbados' national sovereign assets to be taken over if defaults on these loans happen. So I would never support the idea of borrowing money from the Chinese and putting at the airport as collateral. I would never support putting the seaport as collateral. Okay? Let's look at the Sam Lars. The Sam Lars is a standalone project where if the government defaults on the Sam Lars project, the Chinese could just take up the hotel and use the hotel to recoup their investment. On the other hand, though, if you're borrowing $400 million from the Chinese to build roads in St. Andrew and you default on the debt, but the Chinese can't take up the roads, but they can own the roads in terms of having a toll system put on those roads. And for those persons who may say, oh man, that will not happen. Yes, it can happen because Chinese and compliant owns 16 kilometers of highway in Jamaica, right? The Chinese own 16 kilometers of highway in Jamaica, and you have to pay tolls to drive on roads in Jamaica, right? So the toll road system, right? The toll road system is put in place so that they can recoup their investments in fixing those roads. So again, see the danger, right? See the danger of public good versus private good. When road building was a public good done by the Ministry of Public Works, Road Works, we didn't have to worry about international lenders scooping in and taking over our roads and putting tolls on it if you don't repay the foreign currency that we borrowed. And $400 million is a lot of money to borrow from Chinese to build roads, right? We didn't have to worry about it when it was a public good. But now that it has become a private good. You have collateralized lending on roads. You have government policies of mill and pave, where public funds could be directly channeled into specific entrepreneurs' pockets as opposed to be spread all over in terms of the monies. But again, these things happen when consider these essential services like roads and water and electricity and housing, which are state goods, are supposed to be state goods. When you turn them over to private profit-oriented goods, these type of new policy nuances emerges in the country and it causes problems for the residents. Right? And I say it will cause a problem because the average Barbadian does not have the income. Right? They don't have the income that they could suffice and be able to pay up front. Do you know how hard it would be to survive in this country if you had to pay tolls to drive on the roads in Barbados? Right? Do you know how expensive this country could become if the government completely removes subsidies on water? You saw the price of land and houses and housing out to the hands of the average Barbadian can't afford a house. He can't even afford a government house. Look at the price of the houses at the whole project. Right? The credit unions won't lend you, the banks won't lend you. So where exactly would you get monies to buy a house even if the house is $250,000? But most persons working as state owned enterprise or a government job don't even qualify based off the standards set up by the credit unions and the banks. Right? So you saying the fundamental problem here, right? When the IMF or the IMF's philosophy transform it transforms Barbados into a more capitalist private sector I call it hyper capitalism on steroids. But the people of the country operate from a democratic socialist philosophy. The way they spend, we have an island of consumers, right? We have a consumerish mindset, right? Well being subsidized. Right? Somebody's here saying the Ministry of Housing, Rural, Urban ain't helping you. But YouTube user, let me just say to you, unfortunately, the Ministry of Housing does not control urban and rural development. Rural and urban development is now in the hands of the Ministry of Planning and Development. And before that, it was under the office of Prime Minister. So that's why the Minister of Housing could have hardly built any houses. Because he don't control he doesn't control rural and urban. Um that remit was under the Prime Minister's office. So I hope you understand what is happening there. Um, we had a guest who was coming. Yeah, but let me just take a moment to acknowledge some additional persons. We're up at close to 400 persons tonight. So thank you all again for coming on. Uh, good night to you, Mr. Barrow. I'm now sending a message. He's saying that we are ripped for free in Barbados. Hey. um, Land tax going up and some form of fraud is in it, as Franklin, said. Yes, I explained a bit there with the land fraud, but I guess Mr. Franklin will come and explain that. And we have to get Mr. Franklin on the show, uh, because we have some very serious questions for him, as well. So again, thank you guys very much. I'm really enjoying the show. We're up at 400 persons. No, so thank you guys. Really enjoying this pre-budget talk. We need to do some more of these solo conversations so we can hear from you and address your uh, queries. Dr. Anthony Cummings, a man of my heart. I see Dr. Cummings has a podcast as well, and I see is a theme on it. Are you ready for your appointment? So Dr. Cummins, we should invite you onto the program at some point in time. So thank you for tuning in. But he's saying here, anxious to learn for seaports and airports because if you default, crap will small. But I agree with you. Sri Lanka has lost access to the ports. Um, Nigeria and a couple of other African countries lost access to their ports. China has taken over so many ports through Africa, ports through the world, um, because of defaults and because of being in the IMF program. Pakistan has had a very horrible experience with the IMF. Sri Lanka has had a horrible experience with the IMF, and they have a very sizable land plots in countries. They have resources that we could only dream of in Barbados. But again, the IMF is being sold to us as a savior. But if you look at these countries, you will see clearly that's not the case, right? Um, so yeah, so if we continue on this path, Barbados will be tenants in their home on land. Yes, Natasha, this is essentially true. Um, as I spoken in other forums, there is a development agenda on track for Bridgetown and other places. So what is happening is that Bridgetown is set for redevelopment. The entire East Coast is set for redevelopment. There were changes to the Barbados Water Authority Act, which freed up 3,737 hectare-acres of Zone 1 lands. So Zone 1 lands are basically lands which were water prone, have water either running through it, around it, under it, and it takes approximately more than water replenishes within like a 30-day span, I believe. Um, the government is not saying you can build on that. So the geriatric hospital that is being built in Waterford, that is being built on Zone 1 lands, a water zone essentially. They're putting the geriatric hospital in a water zone, right? So you keep hearing me constantly referencing water and land because the two go together, right? A lot Barbados was considered to be landlocked because of our development policies, ED zoning policy. So this government changed those policies and freed up again those 3,000 plus hectare acres, not acres, hectare acres of land. And the Ministry of Planning and Development, which was the former Tonga country planning, now has permission to allow investors to come in and buy up those 3,700 and some hectare acres of land. So investors should be clamoring to come to Barbados, but they're not because when you look at it, uh, the returns on investment, the high cost of doing business, the high cost of living, and it's just not attractive. Like, so if you look at these big international companies, we had Koiman, we had Starbucks, we see Little Caesars, um, but where is the big investment coming into the country that would give us job growth? Hmm? There's not many industries, right? So if we could get about 10 more Koimans that could create jobs, um, not hardware stores, but we talk about levels of investment. If we can get about 10 more of those are the type of investments we need. Job growth, job-led growth. There has been no sectoral growth and job-led growth in Barbados since the change of government. None. Right? We had the Jobs and Investment Committee, and where the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Finance set up a Jobs and Investment Committee that had 8 different committees and 8 different committee heads to drive job-led growth in Barbados, in which they promised the country 20,000 jobs. Former Prime Minister Onapo was on that committee. The former Minister of Finance, Christopher Sinclair, was on that committee. Professor Eugene Bartow was on that committee. Doddridge Miller from Sagicor was on that committee. Senator John Rogers was on that committee, and a couple of other persons, right? Um, but the committee was unsuccessful in terms of creating 20,000 jobs, right? One, we don't have the investment. Two, a lot of persons may not believe this, but persons constantly ask the question, well, if we borrowing this amount of money, why you can't just take the money and do X or do Y or do Z? It can't happen. The borrowed money has instructions to be spent here, whatever. So you just can't take the money and spend it for a reason other than which it was linked to you. You borrow money for a specific reason, and you have to follow those reasons as to why you borrowed that money. And the money cannot be used to do what the government wants to do. That is the restrictive nature of borrowing from the IMF and the World Bank and these institutions. Right? It's much different than borrowing from a private bank, Credit Suisse or JP Morgan Chase or one of these big banks. It's quite different. First Caribbean or so, right? So it does not happen the way persons may think. So we got all of these reserves, and that's essentially what they are, reserves. It cannot be spent locally to help the people of this country. So I hope we understand that. If we have these reserves, we then have to go and look for the money through taxation or other loans that we can then use for the internal development of Barbados. So we have high levels of reserves, but still the development of the country is down. We have high levels of reserves, but we are the additional Caimans. Like we are the additional Starbucks, we are the new Little Caesars. Where are we getting more investments if Barbados is supposed to be this world-class place to do business? Barbados has been on every international media platform in the world. Al Jazeera, BBC, CNN, RT News, Telesure, all. But it is not correlating to investment. It's not correlating to income. Hey, we may not know this, but Barbados is still banned from international credit markets. Hey, and that was because of the debt default. So Barbados is locked into borrowing from the IMF, the IDB, the CDB, the European Investment Bank because of the debt default. And legally we cannot borrow any money, not by choice, but legally we cannot borrow any money because we are banned for defaulting on our debt. Before there was a change in administration, we've never defaulted on Barbados' debt ever in the history of this country, and we paid our debts, all. But no, I keep saying that is what I go back, and that is why I come forward. I paint what was there, and then I paint what is happening now. Well, we had the so-called high debt levels, which was criticized last time or whatever. We still had access to international credit markets. We could have gone into the private spaces and borrowed money for development. No, we defaulted, and that is no longer the case. So I have made or taken a quote, from Alternative View. And I said here that unless private sources of income, i.e. investment, That investment could come from the 9 billion in savings in the Barbados financial system. It could come from the Caribbean. It could come from internationally, not the IMF, not the World Bank, but we're talking private income. So it could be the private banking, private international banking sector. Um, Again, like JP Morgan Chase, the private stock markets, different money markets, insurance, anything like that. Unless private sources of income are injected into the local economy, massive voids will be left to plague Barbados due to the pulling back of government spending in the economy. Right? So you can say to me on the live, if you too have experienced the government pulling back itself and rolling back the amount of money it spends in different areas and allowing the private sector to get more involved. Right? In economics, there's a term called the crowding out effect. And the crowding out effect basically says the more government spends and the bigger government becomes and the more areas government becomes invested in, it crowds out investors and private investors. So what the IMF is saying to the government now is that you need to roll back the amount of money you're spending, reduce the level of interest you have in private areas, and allow private companies to emerge and to take over where the government left off. That's happening on the face of it. But on the back end, the government is guaranteeing revenues and picking winners, right? So you're opening up the field to private investors, but still you're interfering from the governmental level using policy. And examples of that could be the whole project. Examples of that could be the job scandal, where Barbados was involved in an international scandal in terms of buying jobs. Right? You're seeing Barbados guaranteeing revenues for airlines. Right? So you're seeing the government picking winners and guaranteeing specific companies income, while the others have to participate out of their own pockets, and usually they can't, and eventually they do wind up and go to business, and only those persons that are supported heavily by taxpayers' dollars continue to win in the environment that has been set up. And this environment that we are in is basically a replication of Ronald Reagan economics. All right, you hear the term Reagan economics, trickle down economics, where you feed the capitalists and you feed the large businesses. And then those businesses would then essentially give the spoils in terms of creating jobs and hiring an extra maid and hiring staff or whatever. Right? That is what's happening. What is dangerous about it is that you pick local winners, very few local winners, but now in Barbados you're seeing a changing of the guard where you're now selecting international entrepreneurs to come in and be guaranteed taxpayer revenues. And the trickle down does not trickle down. It trickles here so far and then back up the country. So Barbadians do not benefit financially for having a lot of these companies that the government invite here to then be guaranteed revenues. Right? Prime example, in the tourism sector, uh, these hotels, as you know, don't really benefit the country. Most of their retained earnings are kept offshore. Bookings and everything are done overseas. The most money a lot of the hotels send here to Barbados is money to pay staff and money to maintain property, plant, and equipment. Otherwise, all of the money is kept overseas, and Barbadians do not benefit from it. because like no, where our government is in need of financing to be able to run itself, the government is hard pressed to find the revenue. On top of the fact that most of these hotels do operate on subsidy and they operate on tax write-offs and VAT holidays. So the people of the country are not benefiting, but the entrepreneurs are profiteering, and they are backed up by government who put in taxpayers' money in it to guarantee them success. And a prime example is the best program that put $300 million of tax dollars in the hotel sector and say to the hotels that they only have to pay back when they show a profit on their books after a 5 year period. Any good accountant knows how to write down profits that your books could show for the next 20 years that you don't make any money. So therefore, it was a gift over to this sector. But I see time is getting away from me. We are here up at 9:34. So I want to thank you all for tuning in so far. Um, I was expecting someone to come on, but I'm not seeing that person. So I think this is where I'm going to wind down now and to make my final comments. Um, Sean Cole is saying, Kimura, what happened? Barbados should have done. They borrowed cheap money from Japan. It was offering at negative interest rates. Japan are the biggest savers of money. That's true. Japan has a very deep savings as it relates to foreign exchange. Argentina. I'm willing to speak about Argentina, probably not tonight. I think Argentina is a very interesting case study for all countries, both Argentina and Greece. I think Argentina's downfall was with shark loans, vulture loans. Barbados is heading that direction, where vulture institutions will scoop down and pick off our debt. But I will explain that at a later date. Probably not tonight, as I say, both Argentina and Greece. Um, Sadly, I didn't receive any uh, interaction with the screen. I have some persons here, but they're getting cold feet. They don't want to come on to the screen, which is fine. Whenever you do build the courage, you can come on. Thank you, Mr. Barrow. I saw your note. Um, Pleased to have had you on, both you and your wife. Hurricane Red is asking me who was the best program for. The best program was for the hotel. As you know, COVID hit and the hotels were not making any money. So the government put $300 million in a plan, named it the best program, and told the hoteliers that if they keep staff on, the government was willing to pay up to about 80% of the salaries or so, and to pay for money to train the staff. So the money was there to keep staff on board during the COVID period. And then on top of that, remember the government has specified quarantine hotels that they were paying monies to be able to quarantine tourists and locals who were getting sick during the COVID period. Right? So that is what the best program was for. Yeah. Right. So as I said, we've come to the end of alternate views. I had a very good session with you. Please let me know if you learned anything. Please let me know your thoughts. Please let me know what additional information you require from me as a wrap up. Um, and I encourage you all on budget day. Budget day is Monday, to pay close attention to what has happened or what is going to happen in the budget. You can reference alternate views uh, as it relates to some things that were announced: the land tax issue, the dealing with the international business sector, the national insurance, the Barbados Water Authority, and climate financing, climate issues, the Bridgetown um, initiative. Let's look for those issues which were a common thread in Barbados for 2018, um, and we also went back in time and gave the run up to where we're here now. I gave you some information as well as to Barbados before the IMF program, and I gave you Barbados after the IMF program. I wasn't able to paint in every area because this is an extensive topic. So many different angles we could come at it uh, with. So I hope that I touched your hearts in some way in terms of giving you a broad understanding of the issues that we faced, are facing, and that we will face in the future. So next week we'll be back here again after the budget, and we will be having a panel next time so that we can have extensive analysis. Right? We can have extensive analysis on the budget, potential taxes or not, because I personally don't believe taxes will come because Jamaica now had their budget, and I think this is about the 6th year or so that Jamaica had no taxes in their budgets, right? But like I said, everything is not free. We don't get free lunches in the world anymore. So with no taxes means simply increases in levies and fees and increased inflation, and prices will go up again in this coming budget to be able to offset the possibility of giving Barbados another no tax budget. So with that being said, I am Kimar Stewart. Thank you very much for tuning in to Alternate Views. Lock in tomorrow night at 7 p.m. to hear the Marcia Weeks program. So good night to Marcia Weeks, Dave Weeks, and the entire loyal opposition. Good night to you guys, and see you tomorrow. So thank you all for tuning in. Marinette, Gail Biz, Natasha Hope, Pauline Maynard, David Boyne, Mervyn Marius, Marion Griffith. Good night to you and Stephen. Good night to Mr. Barrow and his wife. Uh, good night to Annette Wood. Thank you for tuning in. Lucinda, hello, Square 4. Thank you always, Square 4. Special mention. Alice Murray saying excellent program. Thank you. Adrian X saying our future Prime Minister, Mr. Kimar. Thank you very much for the vote of confidence. Um, Pete Way, thank you very much, Pete Way. See you tomorrow on the program. We have Zaire Campbell. Thank you very much, Zaire. We keenly appreciate it. Hasbra, thank you. Judith Ann, Clark, thank you again. Sensi King, Herbalist, thank you very much for tuning in. Hurricane Writer, very good questions you asked tonight. I very much appreciate that. Lemuel Tull, thank you very much for tuning in. He said trickle-down economics does not work, and you are so correct. um, yeah, so I can't get so far back up to call everyone. If I missed anyone, Romeo Hinkson, Aisha Harding, thank you, Don Reed, thank you very much, FX Trading, Sean Cool, Annette Wood, and the whole lot. Thank you very, very, very much on Alternative Views. Um, Thank you. I enjoy myself speaking with you. And next week, again, after the budget, we're going to have a big panel and we'll be discussing futures for Barbados. So I am signing off now. We are approximately at 9:42, Thursday, March the 14th. Alternate Views. Don't forget that Alternate Views come in a book form. Um, this is available on Amazon. Come in a book form. This is available on Amazon. So type Alternate Views, Kimar Stewart, Barbados' Economic Road to Republic, and you should be able to find uh, alternate views. Also, there's a book called Political Change by Dr. Lisa Ann Chung of Kenley College in the UK. I would probably introduce that at another time. and have uh, Miss Chong on the show as well. And we're going to try to get Dr. Worrell on the show at some point in time, if he agrees, to discuss the concept of dollarization. So we have a bright future, alternate views, many important guests to bring. Um, so I'll see you then. So thank you again, and I will see you tomorrow on the Mars Civic Show, but next week on alternate views after the budget. So thank you very much, and have a good night, everyone.